freely, and glory and honor to Titik Ebru.
Ευχαριστούμε τον Κώστα Παπαδάκη για την αναλυτική του παρουσίαση με θέμα τη σχέτιση του
Thank you,
δικαίου
Kostas
των
Papadakis,
γυναικών και
for
των
your
κοινωνικών
detailed
αγώνων.
presentation regarding the
Τώρα, περάσει το
relation
λόγο
between
στο
class struggle and
δικηγόρο
advocacy.
παρουσιαστή
Now
ο
we'll talk
οποίος
to
θα μας μιλήσει
Yurik
μέσω
Tanasoulias
Zoom Online.
from French. He'll talk to us through Zoom online.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for this invitation. I would like to have a thought for Emily Timtik and all the organization which are here, all the lawyers, dear colleagues. For me, it's important to begin and to speak as a French lawyer about the French situation and French experiences that we have met in France during the last year. First, I will begin with a big movement that all lawyers know in France during the revolt after police crime in France in June 2023. A young kid named Nael was killed by French police during a normal control. A police officer shot him in the head, and this police murder has aroused the indignation of the country's youth, particularly those from working class neighborhoods. So big revolts happened in all France, and all the French territory was rising up in suburbs for sure. So French state began to create massive repression. All the French state was organized to do big repression inside the French territory. The states use the means and tactics of anti-terrorism. We saw in the streets against the youngsters rebelling all the section of anti-terrorist police. We call them GIGN, BRI, RED. They are usually involved in counterterrorism and they're involved to fight the revolts. They were using their weapons, very dangerous weapon, and one youngster was killed in Marseille during this revolt. And with this police repression, for sure, there was the judicial repression of the young people, and the judicial use the industrial techniques of mass incarceration, foremost among them immediate trial. Immediate trial is well-known thing for lawyers in France. It is a way of taking some people in custody very fast with a immediate trial and for sure an incarceration after this trial. The numbers are really heavy for this repression. There were in 8 days 4,000 youngsters arrested, 2,000 were convicted, and 1,700 were sent to prison. Inside this conviction, a big part was minor people. So, looking at all these immediate trials and all this repression, a lot of lawyers wanted to do something with militants and activists of the social movements, of the political movements against the French state. So they decided to unionize and create what we call anti-racist legal team. It's a way of create a link between militants and lawyers, this kind of organization. And it was a real response in face of massive repression throughout all France. It was needed to have a collective response. And the challenge of this organization was first and foremost to provide an effective counsel in the context of mass immediate trial. when activists were going to the first trial, sometimes there were not enough lawyers for all the youngster who was taken there, and the justice was really harsh. Prosecutors wanted to send them to jail right away without a chance to organize a normal defense, as we found in other times. So the challenge for this kind of organization was to coordinate lawyers' effort to help young people facing mass court appearance, and also laying the foundation for political defense. In fact, it was not to create an organization for lawyers when there are a lot of cases, but it was also to have a political standing, to create a political speech inside the courts to explain what had happened in France, what is police violence, and it's a really, really big issue in France. And it was also a challenge to articulate a new political way of conducting defense by professionals on the front line. So this kind of organization in which I was part of is for sure politically innovative, but it's based on a traditional method of organizing professionals to serve a cause. And in a second way, I can speak about another organization in France who is really, really looking at the law as a battleground or a field of struggle. A few days ago, an organization focused on the collective defense in the west of France was dissolved by the state. We really know as French lawyers and militants this kind of new creation of the French state as a dissolution, administrative dissolution. It is a new tactic used by the French state to undermine the conditions that make effective organization possible. And it is also a way to destroy the conditions for collective defense. So they, with some decrees, they say that one organization is dissolved, and all the people inside this organization can not longer meet each other. And this dissolution that was 2 days ago is unique in that it targets an organization that has used the law as a weapon in the service of those targeted for repression. And I think it really highlights what motivates this kind of dissolutions. It is really to stop any organization who can act against the justice repression and make some big cases against it. It's a way for the state to destroy the possibility of reappropriation of the law by those facing criminal proceedings. And this for sure demonstrates the state's fear of the method adopted by this organization. Looking at the method, it was an organization who had a particular way of doing things, and I believe it differs from the anti-racist legal team I talked to you about. Firstly, in that it's based on the knowledge sharing from activists to lawyers, and from lawyers for sure to activists. And in fact, it's really interesting because it's a way of breaking down the barriers between professionals and activists. And we all know as professionals that studying law can have the effect of distancing legal professionals from the working classes. We all see in university, I mean, I see it in France, that sociologically, but also in terms of ethos, ways of speaking, behaving, and mobilizing the tool of law, we have a big differences. And sometimes it's useful because law is really a science in some ways, but sometimes it can become a status and take some lawyers inside the class of bourgeoisie. So in this organization who was dissolved, collective defense activists, they have studied with lawyers the cases. They didn't have the status of lawyer, but they were helping the lawyers to be that it was not like one lawyer working, but one lawyer with 100 militants working on one case and becoming really successful in this case, finding some issue in the procedure and destroying some procedures. So it was really important to say that law as a field of struggle cannot be just monopolized by the professionals, but can be shared. And we need for sure to continue to organize ourselves to help the working class and to stand our ground in the current struggles. Thank you very much.
Τον ευχαριστούμε για αυτή τη σύντομη παρουσίαση και τώρα θα περάσουμε στον Γιάν Θερμόν, ο οποίος είναι Γενικός Γραμματέας της Διεθνούς Ένωσης Δημοκρατικών Δικηγόρων, δικηγόρος Βρυξελών. Θα μας μιλήσει μέσω Zoom. Είχαμε ένα λάθος στη σειρά. Θα περάσουμε τώρα σε ένα φυλακισμένο δικηγόρο, μέλος του νομικού γραφείου του λαού, στον Μπεχίτ Σασκί. Θα διαβάσει το κείμενο ο Γιουνάη.
Tekrar merhaba. Meslektaşım, meslek büyüğüm, üstadım, öğrencisi olmaktan onur duyduğum
Hello again. I'm honored to be the student of Behic Aşçı, whom I'm honored to be his colleague as well. He's now under incarcerated for the last 7 years. I'm going to read his letter.
siz tüm meslektaşlarımı selamlıyorum.
First of all, I greet all of you, my colleagues.
Hukukun etkili mücadele aracı olduğu anlamına geliyor değil mi? Bu toplantının
Doesn't the fact that you have come together in this meeting mean that the law is an effective means of the struggle? Isn't this meeting itself a ground for struggle? What is law? Law is the field of implementation of the justice of the ruling class. The constitution, laws, courts all protect the interest of the ruling parties in the final analysis. At the same time, it also shows the point at which the class conflict, the struggle for democracy, the people's struggle for rights are at. Since the law defends and serves the interest of the ruling class, can the law be a ground or instrument of struggle? Before moving on to this question, I would like to share a moment of memory of mine.
2006'da başladığım ölüm orucu eylemini 22 Ocak 2007'de
On 22nd of January 2007, I ended my death fast, which started on the 5th of April 2006 after 293 days, when an agreement was reached. I was taken to the Chapa Medical Faculty Hospital. I stayed in intensive care for 10 days, and I was put to sleep for the first 5 days of these 10 days. When I woke up, I immediately asked one of the lawyers from our office to come and he did. I asked him for two things, my mobile phone and my lawyer ID card. The mobile phone is understandable. I might want to call around, but what about a lawyer ID? What good is a lawyer's ID for a naked person who can't get out of the bed? Then I thought about it. I wanted it so naturally and quickly. It was as natural as breathing air, and it was necessary. Yes, I had to have that ID with me because that identity was a symbol. The fact that I was a lawyer in the struggle for democracy, a revolutionary lawyer symbolized all the values created up to that day and all the memories I have saved. I think this memory of mine also explains my perspective on law as ground of struggle. Law also shows the level of oppressor and oppressed conflict. The rulers did not give us any of our rights on their own. All over the world, we won our rights through struggle. Every right was won by paying a price. For example, we won our right to a maximum 8-hour working day with strikes, struggles, and deaths. Otherwise, if it were up to the factory owners, they would want us to work 13, 14 hours. Therefore, although the law is basically the enforcer of the justice of the dominators, it cannot meet all the wishes of the dominators and the organized struggle of workers, civil servants, peasants, students, and lawyers limits to them. Today, all over the world, we see that our economic and social rights are being slashed and destroyed. Social rights are being reduced, wages are being lowered, and the people are becoming poorer and poorer. The rulers do this by changing the constitution and laws. They do it with the rulings of the Supreme Court. Hence, the law must be a field and a tool of struggle. Only and lawyers can wage the struggle in the field of law. It is only lawyers who are truly independent from the ruling power in the functioning of the law. So, what can the lawyer do? First of all, they have the power to change the outcome. There is no power that can take a step despite organized lawyers. The lawyer can influence the creation and amendment of laws. They can inform the people about their rights and warn them when it's necessary. They can influence court decisions, even if they do not change the outcome. They at least have the power to declare their side. Even nothing is done, the lawyer declares his or her side and maintains their respect for their profession. The defense profession has been honored to the extent that it has defended the oppressed, those whose labor has been stolen, and those who have sustained injustice. All lawyers and defense lawyers remembered in history are those who defend the oppressed. History has condemned those who defend the oppressors. The struggle in the field of law must be organized. Since we have won our rights defined in the laws and the constitution, then I think we should use all of those rights. We should not limit our struggle to courtrooms and working hours. Our goal should be to change, not to oppose and identify. We must struggle with the goal of getting results. While waging a struggle, we should not limit ourselves to laws. It should not be forgotten that the rulers can change the laws at any time and immobilize us. The capitalist state, which is the state of the bourgeoisie, wants to show itself above the classes. Therefore, it builds its power on force and law, represented by the military and the police. It is propagandized that the law is impartial, independent at an equal distance to everyone. However, the law is neither impartial nor independent. Historical development proves this. While the law of the slave state defended the interests of the slave owners, the laws of the feudal state defended the interests of feudal lords. In capitalist society, they defend the interests of the bourgeoisie. We are now in the 21st century. Can't the human mind make laws that observe, protect, guarantee, and grant the rights of everyone? It can. It can do it very well, but it doesn't. Because it is not the human mind that makes laws, but class interest. For this very reason, in the socialist state, laws protect the oppressed, the laborers. It organizes all life in their interest. For this reason, the struggle in the field of law is more important and more prominent, because the law claims to give and distribute justice. Brecht said, justice is the bread of the people. Yes, justice is the bread of the people. This is why the field of law is important and fundamental in the struggle for democracy. The lawyer shows this reality to the people through his struggle. He shows the real face of the law, which is the shell covering oppression, exploitation, and tyranny to the people. It also shows the solution. For this very reason, it is not decisive what the lawyer struggle cannot change the result. Even if if it cannot change the result, it tells the true face of bourgeoisie law and shows the solution. And this is the real victory. This is the real gain. What I have said so far concerns the social character of the lawyer in the struggle for democracy. There is also the aspect of individual change and achievement. I think that the law has an aspect that alienates, devalues, corrupts, and selfishes those who practice it. Of course, this effect depends on how you practice law. When you transform law from a commercial activity into an instrument of the struggle for democracy, your individual journey begins. Our change begins. We evolve into another person. Our priorities change. We become worthy. Marx says that socialism is man becoming a man, a human being becoming a human being. We begin to be human with this choice. Being a lawyer in the service of the struggle for democracy ennobles people, adds value, makes them human. It takes us out of the ordinary. We become the masters of our own labor and destiny. We become free. That is to say, in order to become honorable intellectuals for our individual freedom, we must put our professional knowledge and experience at the service of the struggle for democracy, the people's struggle for rights and the revolutionary struggle. We must do this for the people and for ourselves. I thank you all for listening and wish you good work. I send you my greetings.
Ευχαριστούμε για την παρέμβαση του Τούρκου συναδέλφου. Δυστυχώς η παρέμβαση έγινε με αυτόν τον τρόπο μέσω
Thank you
της ανάγνωσης του
for that
κειμένου, διότι
Turkish
χρειάζεται να επισημανθεί ότι αποτελεί
colleague.
έναν
It's
από τους
sad
πολλούς
that
δικηγόρους
he
στην
could not
Τουρκία,
deliver
διότι
his speech
όπως
because
φαίνεται οι
unfortunately he's one
ισορροπίες
of
δεξιάς
the many
μας
lawyers in Turkey.
έχουν
As you
καταδικαστεί
see
σε
in the
πολυετής
pictures all around
ποινές
us, they've been
κατάπαυσης.
condemned to many years of prisons. They've been
Θεωρούμε
sentenced
ότι
to
έδωσε μια εξαιρετικά καλή
to
εικόνα
prison, and we
ως προς
believe
το
that this
πώς πολιτική
presentation
πραγματικότητα αποτελεί
made
στοιχεία
obvious
κατανάλωσης
how the
των
law
συμφερόντων
reflects
της άουσας τάξης
institutionally
και πώς στην
the
πραγματικότητα
interest
έργο του
of
συνδικόρου
the
περάσει
dominant
σε
classes and how
συνθήκες
our work, the
καπιταλιστικής
work of a
υπεριαλιστικής
lawyer
κρίσης. Πρέπει να συνιστάται η
in this
προάσπιση των
capitalist
συμφερόντων του εργαζόμενου λαού.
imperialist crisis must be how to defend the rights and the interests of working people. Now we are going to listen to German lawyer Anna Bussel.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being here on the first symposium in the memory of Emre Timdik, which is a very great honor for us being lawyers in Germany. I think I'm the last one for this session. Okay, so I hope you are still a little bit awake, but I will try to have some words to you. I'm sure you heard some of these things because some of the things I will say are already said this afternoon, but nevertheless, I will try to focus on 3 points which I think are very important in the question of how can law be an instrument, a means of struggle for us. But before I focus on these 3 points, let me have some forewords. It's not the first time this afternoon that we hear that law is an instrument for establishing and securing rule and power. Yes, that's true. And I think we have to say that again and again, because especially in Germany, even mass murder and bringing people in millions to concentration camps was called as legal and called as law. So we talk about a term, law, which is not a neutral one. It's always a term which is used by the ruling class. And if we are not the ones who are saying what is the reality behind it, nobody will say it. And if we talk about bourgeois law, about the law of the ruling class, about the law of the bourgeoisie, we have to state, and we can repeat what Anatole France said once, I think very, very good and very short, in his novel, The Red Lily. It is for the poor to maintain the rich in their power and idleness. In return, they are allowed to work under the majestic equality of the law, which forbids rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges, beg in the streets, and steal bread. This is, in short, the point of bourgeois law. And to say it up to front, it is not our law, but it can be an instrument for us too. But we must be aware of the limits it has. And we have to be aware of the following. Even bourgeois rights and bourgeois laws is nothing which can be taken for granted, especially in times of crisis, of the ruling order, of the capitalist order. Because law is always the superstructure of the social objectives behind it. For those who claim that it is their law, the bourgeoisie, their order is in crisis, a crisis that is obvious. The global exploitation of resources and people, the destruction of the economies of poorer countries, and the environment has never been as perfectly organized as it is today. Whether the millions of refugees who can no longer live where they were born, whether the millions who can no longer find gainful employment, the wars raging in every corner of the world, all of this also threatens the prevailing order. And this order needs to be secured for the ruling class. And if bourgeois law is no longer able to do this, then they will do it by force. So, to say it short, there are always two responses to crisis and the crisis we have now. The pure, naked violence to save the ruling order, and that of progress, which recognizes from the crisis what the cause of the crisis is: the private ownership of the means of production, the capitalist order. As progressive, revolutionary advocates, we find ourselves in this contradiction. On the one hand, we see the growing violence that the peoples have long known, but which is also increasingly finding its way into all countries of the bourgeois democracy, its violence and arbitrariness. And on the other hand, we still have the means of bourgeois law that improves the ground for the struggle for rights and freedom, the ground for overwhelming the social and political injustice rather than naked violence. As I said before, it's not our law, it's the one of the bourgeoisie, but we can use it. And especially in this time of crisis, we are forced, and we are really forced to do so. Because the battle for bourgeois law is one that will be and is being waged by those whose law it never was, of us. I will illustrate how we have to do that, and try to do that in only 3 points, I said before. Out of my view, these are the main points. The first point is the struggle about formal law. Formal law is often said as the heart of the law, the constitutional law. And there is also something real behind it. If the form is cancelled, we become lawless. Then no longer we have anything against which we can measure bourgeois law. Where the rules of the game no longer apply, we lose our power in law. If the formal law is abolished, we do not have a chance anymore to fight for the few freedoms, rights of those who do not have any power, for the poor, for the migrants, for the accused. The formal rights are the rules of the game that should necessarily apply to everyone, even in political law, even in criminal law against the so-called enemy. So let's stick the rulers to that. For example, in the fight against special courts that have long existed in Germany in the form of the so-called courts of state protection, we have to fight against these special courts because it's an extraordinary court and not a formal law court. In the fight against the fact that our clients, regarded as enemies, have to suffer under special prison conditions, under special prejudicial measures, such as shielding, like this, by means of partition screens, by mail control, by visit surveillance, and so on. In the attempts to banish the content of court hearings to secrecy through so-called self-reading procedures, which means the cancellation of the principle of immediacy and orality that applies in Germany. Or, and this is very central to our current proceedings, against 3 defendants who are accused of membership of the so-called DHKPG, and thus of a foreign terrorist organization, as it's called in Germany, the right to submit motions for evidence and for these to be followed up, the right to have evidence from the public prosecutor's office scrutinized and not taken for granted, the duty to subject evidence that comes from the state apparatus to special scrutiny instead of taking it for granted, as it currently is the case. In short, to actually apply the formal rules on the presumption of innocence. Or, in general, the right of effective legal protection. Actually, the question of legal protection in court in Germany, this primarily concerns refugees, whose right to this is increasingly being abolished at all. The right to be able to defend oneself in freedom, contrary to the trend of being detained even faster and even longer, even if there is no suspicion of a criminal offense. In Germany, this applies above all to public law, which now allows people to be locked up very quickly if they are so-called dangerous, even if they are not suspected of a criminal offense. All these things, and these were only some examples, are examples for abolishing formal law. And if formal law is abolished, we have no formal law to measure for the measure of instrument of bourgeois law anymore. The second topic is the material law. Sure, the fight for the enforcement of the few constitutional rights that exist. Because it's clear, if you don't own newspapers, if you don't own buildings, if you don't own property, to put it briefly, you need all the more opportunities to gather in public and spread your opinion. Or as Lenin once said, as long as we did not abolish the weather, the storm, the snow, we need buildings to gather and organize. And these rights are increasingly being curtailed or cancelled altogether. The use of freedom of opinion and freedom of assembly, including artistic freedom, is increasingly being subjected to political law as a point of reference for criminal or even terrorist behavior. As, for example, in the case we are currently defending in Düsseldorf. No one there is accused of an act of violence or anything similar. Instead, they are accused of organizing events and concerts that are intended to support terrorism. That is our task, to keep fighting for this. No, the mutilation of constitutional rights cannot be a crime. The rulers, the judges, the executive itself holds these freedoms so dear. So you must also grant them for your enemies. When the judges say that everyone is equal by law and has the same rights, then we state this also applies to those whose position you don't share, or your right and your law is a farce. Yes, we have to make this clear and to show what is actually the cause of the unequal treatment. It's the class struggle and the class divide. For example, it is currently the case that in Germany a lot of young people stand in front of the court and are judged, even go to prison, only because they stick themselves to the streets and thus bring traffic to stand still. It is judged as violence because it is force with the car drivers' effects in their physical freedom. So as far as we know, it's not judged as violence when power structures exist as in wage labor and a worker is forced to leave his job. But it's certainly regarded as violence, as already stated in an earlier judgment of the Federal Court of Justice in the 50s of Germany, when it was stated that it's violence if a strike paralyzes the infrastructure across the board. So violence and the term of violence is simply a question of power. If young people stick themselves on the streets, it's violence. To build more and more borders, to keep refugees away, it is not. We have to carry out what lies behind, that the term violence is not neutral, but it is a political question. Our task is to uncover this, because it shows that it's not about freedom of opinion, freedom of assembly, it's ultimately about on which side you stand. Another example, the constant expansion of supposedly neutral legal terms and paragraphs so that more and more constitutionally protected behavior is to be covered by them. Or the freedom of opinion is upheld, but we can see so many occasions where the state tries to limit the right to gather in public. For example, in the last months, for people in solidarity with Palestinians. They just forbid gathering for weeks. They prohibit certain slogans. Or the rally in front of the court in Düsseldorf for the three defendants. Here too, the court had to be involved because it was to be banned. We have to fight against this through all instances and always try to utilize European law for this purpose, including the contradictions between the rulers themselves, because of course they also exist. The third point, out of my view, is giving a grandstand. If they, the rulers, attack opinions they don't like, leftists, anti-fascists, and drag them to court, then it is our job as lawyers to give a platform to the convictions, insights, and attitudes of these defendants. Then it is our job to ensure that they are heard. How often do we hear, this is not a political trial. These political speeches have no place here. But they do, because this is the background. This is not about neutrality. This is about indicting political attitudes. None other than the first Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Western Germany, summarized this at the end of the 1940s. He said, and this was totally wrong, the vast majority of Germans were not Nazis. But now, he said, and this is true because it was the beginning of this, now is the time to fight against the left-wing radicalism. Yes, this is what they do. And if they do so, then we, as lawyers, have to care for that the attitudes, the opinions, the position of these people who are accused are heard, even in front of the court and in front of the court to the public as a grandstand. So, out of this, my conclusion is the following. We have no illusion. What Anatole France said is still true. Rights are only rights when they can be enforced, when there is a possibility of exercising them. But this requires a material basis. The expression of opinion needs money and printing presses and newspapers. Assembly needs rooms, streets, space. And the class antagonism that some people own and others do not remains. As long as there are rich and poor, there is no equality. But we must not simply ignore bourgeois law. We must utilize it in the fight for the rights of the poor and the lawless, the enemies of the state, from the left, the anti-fascists. And in doing so, we also ensure that these few bourgeois rights do not fall victim to violence and arbitrariness. Let's not fool ourselves. An order of the powerful, a capitalist order, is to be safeguarded, an order that wages wars and leaves death in its wake, an order that builds a wall around Europe and causes thousands to die in the Mediterranean, an order that lets thousands starve to death but keeps a few in their wealth, an order that ensures that every day the world becomes uninhabitable, dries up, dies, just so that the order of profit is maintained. An order in which the poverty rate in this and in Germany and also worldwide has reached a historical level, despite the wealth. The ruling class answer to this is violence, and the real danger comes precisely from the fact that what is labeled as law and order to save this order. But nevertheless, we have to oppose this with the means of our rights by insisting on the law. But that becomes worthless, this struggle, without full streets and squares, without demonstrations, without the struggle on the streets in schools and factories. Because only then will conditions change, and with them the right. Karl Marx's statement that law is a superstructure of social condition proves its correctness, especially in times of intensified class conflicts. We live in such times. Let's change the social conditions, and so we can change the law.
Ευχαριστούμε την Άννα για αυτή, θα λέγαμε, την πλήρη παρουσίασή
Thank you,
της.
Anna, for this very full presentation using many different examples regarding law in different contexts that show how this supposedly neutral notion of equality in front of the law is actually means that there's a class-oriented instrument that reflects the interest of the powers that be. You also referred to Karl Marx's superstructure, the way he described it some 2 centuries ago. This is exactly what, in a nutshell, reflects the role of law as a mechanism of social and class struggle. Next, I would like us to have a half-hour break, 1 hour break, is it? Let me see. Yeah, and then we will start to the third circle that has to do with the use of anti-terror law as a weapon against people's movements. Thank you very much.